Hey Optimancers, Chris here. I've been making Druid and Wild Shape videos lately, so obviously my first deep dive into the new Unearthed Arcana will be the Druid, which had massive changes. I'm making this video under the assumption you've already familiarized yourself with the 1D&D proposed Druid rules. If you haven't, then click that link at the top of your screen where I cover the Unearthed Arcana document itself. This video will be my analysis and opinions regarding those changes, so we're going to do some deep diving here. First off, there are some broader design goals that are clear with the new Druid. Some of those are made clear by these fantastic gray boxes, like we see right here. We started seeing these in the last playtest, and these are great, showing us a playtest and asking us what we think of the changes without explaining what you were trying to achieve with those changes really leaves an important part of communication out of the process. So a big thumbs up for these. There were several of these design notes through the document, and I found them all really helpful. But these appear to be the goals of the 1D&D changes to the Druid. Number 1, a move away from front-loading classes. Number 2, a move towards impactful capstones. 3, a move away from players having to shop the monster manual and being restricted to a handful of thematic wild shape choices. And 4, a move towards wild shape being a central feature of the class. 5, a move away from Moon Druids out-tanking fighters and barbarians. And finally, 6, a move towards more streamlined play for Druids in general. I support every single one of these goals, but they required some big ideas to make happen, and we absolutely see some huge ideas with the 1D&D Druid. But, well, it's a good thing this isn't the official version, and they're looking for our feedback, because although there are good ideas here, there needs to be some adjustments to achieve those goals. I'll probably do a video discussing the feedback for this entire document that I will be providing in my survey, but first let's really deep dive into this Druid and see where they nailed it and see where they missed the mark. Let's start with Channel Nature. This is the, central feature of this proposed Druid. It fuels our Wild Shape, our Healing Blossoms, and our Find Familiar spell. So I like the concept of Channel Nature. Obviously, it's the Druid version of Channel Divinity, and that's a perfectly good idea as long as it's distinct from Channel Divinity. The number of uses seem reasonable to me. You get 2 uses, then you get 1 back on a short rest, both on a long rest, and I think that looks good. And then it scales up to 4 uses, which I also think looks good. Now, there's a place I think they missed an opportunity to make this idea better. Having it fuel Wild Shape is great. It's iconically a Druid thing, so perfect. Then at level 2, we're going to get 2 more options, Healing Blossom and Find Familiar. So an Area of Effect healing feature and a pet. Both of these are Druid-ish.
Funny, she doesn't look Druish.
But not iconically Druid. So if I want to play a Druid that doesn't use Wild Shape, it's really kind of shoehorning me into Healer. Because once I have my pet, then all I really have left with my Channel Nature is Healing Blossoms. The opportunity here is to allow Channel Nature to customize who we want our Druid to be. Like in our one subclass presented, the Circle of the Moon Druid, there are no Channel Nature fueled features. What they could do is have a feature where you expand a Channel Nature and provide some kind of Wild Shape boost. Then each subclass could use Channel Nature to do something thematically appropriate. So maybe a Land Druid uses Channel Nature to affect terrain for some kind of battlefield control effect. A Wildfire Druid could do some kind of Fire Blast. I'm just spitballing. But if this is the Druid feature that makes them distinct from other classes, it's really pushing you in one direction. And if you aren't playing a Moon Druid, that might not be the direction you want to be pushed. So I like Channel Nature, but I want more. Wild Shaping Druid or Healing Druid just isn't enough. Now maybe the plan is to have different Channel Nature options in all the other Druid subclasses, in which case great, but then it's kind of odd that the Circle of the Moon is left out as the one subclass that doesn't get a distinct Channel Nature option. And giving Druids opportunities other than Wild Shape we know is one of their design goals because they told us.
We want Druids to have more that they can do with this part of their character, because as exciting as shape-shifting is, it's not appropriate for every scene, and we occasionally find that there are Druid players who pick the class far more to be a nature magician than a shapeshifter.
Right.
So that's already their goal. So my intention is to let them know in the survey that there's more they can do to reach that goal, because I don't think it's achieved in this iteration of the Druid. Yet, the bones are there, good ideas, now it needs refining. So moving on to armor training. Light armor and shield proficiency with no prohibition against wearing metal armor. So this is notable because normally, in fact universally before this, shield proficiency was always married to medium armor proficiency. I actually like getting away from that. Light armor and shield makes perfect sense to me. The big news, of course, is that prohibition against wearing metal armor is gone, and just because you're not proficient doesn't mean you can't get medium or heavy armor proficiency from other sources. I know I'm not alone in not liking the metal armor prohibition. I figured there were two possible fixes. Either you spell out specific penalties for wearing metal armor, like maybe you couldn't use your channel nature if you wear metal armor or something like that, or you get rid of the prohibition altogether. This is the simpler solution of the two, and simple is good. Now I'm going to save talking about wild shape until the end, because that's obviously the biggest topic. It's probably going to take the majority of this video to talk about wild shape. So first, let's talk about healing blossoms. So balance-wise, I think this hits the mark when you get it. So assuming you start with, say, a +3 wisdom modifier, that's 3d4, which is around 8 points of healing, and being able to split it up is cool. Not a lot of scaling on this one though. With a wisdom of 20, we get about 13 points of healing. So I don't think I would be spending my action that way at higher levels unless I'm about to rest and maybe sitting on an extra channel nature, or allies are actually down in combat and I'm looking to bring them up. In other words, at higher levels, this just isn't going to be a primary choice, meaning again, we're pushed more into focusing on wild shape. Speaking of being pushed into wild shape, we have our 15th level feature, and it's our only scaling beyond a d4 or 2 as our wisdom is improved. And the scaling ties it directly to using wild shape. So now it's not distinct from wild shape at all. So we've gone from 2 options with our channel nature to 1. So I guess first off, I would like this to be more iconic to the Druid. Like maybe you could use channel nature to animate plants to grapple your enemies, or something like that. If healing is an option, then I think there should be more than a couple options for channel nature. And second, we see wild shape scaling through the Druid levels. We see scaling for wild shape at level 5, level 7, level 9, level 11, level 13, level 17. I would like this feature to see improvements at those levels as well. Maybe a higher die type, maybe a bigger area, or maybe it removes conditions or something. Something to keep it as a viable alternative to wild shape, and ideally, if they switch this feature to something more iconic to the Druid, that should scale at the same points as well. And Wild Companion is fine. I mean, we've had this in stashes, and I think overall it's been well received. It's still not really an alternative to Wild Shape though. Like, you use your channel nature once, you have your familiar, so when you use channel nature again, you're choosing Healing Blossoms or Wild Shape. And if Healing Blossoms isn't scaling, well, you can see where we're going with that. You're going to be forced into wild shape. Another new feature we get is Archdruid. Whenever you roll initiative, you regain 1 use of your channel nature. This is probably fine. I mean, there's, I guess, the potential bag of rats issues here, but assuming your DM doesn't call for initiative when you squish a rat, you're probably fine. I mean, when it came to gaining heroic inspiration when you roll a 20 on a d20 test, that was a real bag of rats problem because that test is easy for the player to initiate. Initiative is a lot harder, so I don't really have that concern here. So before we dive into wild shape, just a quick note on the epic boon. I love that they're providing a capstone that rewards the Druid player who went Druid for 20 levels. I like that epic boons are being boosted, and the +2 ability score that allows you to exceed the normal 20 cap, great. This is a good direction, and it's a thumbs up. Now, would I like it even more if every class had an epic and exclusive capstone that was well balanced against the other class capstones? Yeah, but nevertheless, this is a big step in the right direction. Now, obviously, there are some spellcasting changes. We're using the primal spell list, the new methods of preparing spells, ritual casting, all of that, but those aren't really new. I mean, we've seen the same thing in the past 2 playtests, and as far as playing with them, they're a modest nerf to spellcasters, which I'm okay with. Also, Knowing how many spells of each level to prepare is a learned skill. By removing that decision, I think it makes it easier for new players, and I like making things easier for new players. So I'm going to spend the rest of this video talking about Wild Shape. I'll combine Circle of the Moon in there because it's about Wild Shape. Obviously, the changes to Wild Shape are massive, and here's the thing. Wild Shape did need massive changes. First off, Wild Shape should be an enticement to play a Druid, but in actuality, it's been a discouragement. This has been backed up with the data.
In the last 8 years, as we've looked at player data, we have found that as beloved as the Druid is from a sentiment standpoint, in actual play, the Druid is the least played class in 5th edition of the classes that are in the player's handbook.
Right.
And a lot of that can be boiled down to the complexity of Wild Shape.
But beyond being a discouragement, the balance of this feature is absolutely off the scale. Some forms are broken, others are useless. If you had in your mind some kind of theme for your Druid, like you're an Arctic Druid, so you pick Arctic forms, unless you're reskinning stuff constantly, you could basically forget that.
The 2014 version of Wild Shape requires the player to not only figure out how their class works, which every D&D player, that's a part of the fun of the game, is figuring out their class. They also need to figure out how to go diving into pools of stat blocks.
Yes, welcome to the Monster Manual, and you better understand your CR ratings.
Exactly. And that pool is a pool that is largely designed for dungeon masters.
Right.
And so there are some fun things to be discovered in that pool, and many Druid players over the last 8 years have discovered fun animal options, either in the Monster Manual or in another book. But it's also just as easy to find an option that is not actually that effective.
Right.
Having features and spells where the player needs to shop the Monster Manual have been a thorn in the side of 5th edition right from the get-go. Jeremy Crawford hit the nail on the head. The monsters in the Monster Manual are designed with the DM in mind. This means they aren't well balanced against each other, especially as a player tool. Also, the number of options aren't built with the player in mind either. If you're a high-level Moon Druid and you have to pick an animal form at CR 6, well, I hope you like mammoths, because that is your only option. So they decide to go with templates. So this opens up the thematics completely and gives you the tool you need for mechanical balance. As an idea, I mean, obviously I'm on board because I recommended templates as a Wild Shape fix a year ago. It might not be the only way to fix Wild Shape, but it's a simple solution, and as I said, I like simple solutions. So I like this idea, but we need to work on the details, because although there are good ideas here, this implementation, just like Channel Nature, needs refinement, and in this case, big refinements. These changes to Wild Shape are being blasted online. Like, if I want to use Wisdom for attacks and damage and get a D8 attack, I can use the Shillelagh cantrip, which doesn't use spell slots and uses a bonus action. Or I can use Wild Shape, using Channel Nature, a full action, prevents spellcasting, lowers my armor class, removes all my proficiencies and feats and racial features, and doesn't offer much in exchange. Circle of the Moon improves it, but not enough to allow them to really use this in combat effectively. Now I'm going to say something that might be controversial. I don't think a Druid, even a Moon Druid with Wild Shape, should be as good a fighter as a fighter, or even as a Paladin, which is also in this playtest packet. Druids are full casters, they shouldn't also be full melee combatants. So from my perspective, ideally what these templates would provide is enough that the Druid doesn't feel like this option is useless in combat, and for a Moon Druid, be enough that you can fight beside the Paladin and maybe not be quite as good, but good enough that you still feel like you belong in the fight. This version of Wild Shape does not achieve that. First, let's discuss the rules themselves. The rules in the 2014 Player's Handbook are a mess for Wild Shape. Nobody knows how it's supposed to work. There is vague stuff all over those rules. I recently did a video critiquing how poorly Wild Shape is worded. So, let's read this one. As a magic action, you transform into a form that you've learned from this feature. You start knowing one form. Animal of the Land, which is detailed in the wild shape section later in this class's description. You stay in that form for a number of hours equal to half your druid level, or until you use wild shape again, have the incapacitated condition, or die. You can also end wild shape early as a bonus action. Okay, so this part is 99% of the way there, but there is a mistake. Did anyone else notice the mistake here? Because I haven't seen anyone else point this out. What's the rule when you have fractions in D&D? Right, always round down. So what's your wild shape duration at level 1? Well, half of 1 is 0.5. Rounded down, duration 0 hours. So they need to either add rounded up or minimum of 1 after you stay in that form a number of hours equal to half your druid level. Well, in a form, its game statistics replace yours, and your ability to handle objects is determined by the form's limbs rather than your own. You retain your personality, memories, ability to speak, and wild shape. You lose access to all your other features, such as the ability to cast spells. You can continue to concentrate on one. So your game statistics are replaced other than your personality, memories, ability to speak, and wild shape. You lose access to all other features. Well, that's clear enough, but it's a problem. Because if all my game statistics are replaced by this, well, this isn't good enough. First off, this form doesn't have any saving throw proficiencies. So I just lost all my saving throw proficiencies and they are replaced with nothing. Secondly, this form doesn't have any skill proficiencies. And that makes no sense. I mean, I'm proficient in survival, but whoops, I'm wild shape. So did I forget that skill? Because the wild shape feature says I keep my memories, but the mechanics aren't backing that up. Now these are easy fixes. Allow the druid to retain their saving throw proficiencies and skill proficiencies. This is a no-brainer. Saving throw proficiencies, use your proficiencies. Skills, use your skills. But just as big a loss, we're losing our feats and our racial features. So that is severe. Now, I kind of understand because feats and racial features were that messy part of wild shape. However, the main issue with carrying feats over was the interaction with your hit points and hit dice with the old version of wild shape. And since these templates keep your own hit points and hit dice, you could probably just have feats carry over, and I don't foresee any problems. If there's a feat that would be messy here, let me know. Racial features, though, are going to be messy, so I can understand why they might want to just say you leave them behind. However, I don't really like it. Like, my halfling druid stops being lucky because I'm wild-shaped. My elf stops being resistant to being charmed. I've been mulling over in my head how I would address this, and honestly, I don't think there's an easy solution. I thought maybe you could keep your racial features except for armor class and speed types, but you still get weird interactions, especially with races like Changeling. So maybe losing racial features is the best solution. But if it is, then that sacrifice needs to be compensated right here, and it's not. Now, obviously, the one thing on this template that really sticks out is hit points, as you keep your own hit points and hit dice. This is certainly clean and uncomplicated, but when we look at what our armor class will be, it's an obvious problem. A druid in studded leather with a shield and a dex modifier of even a modest +2, that's 16. This can't have armor class 16, it can't get above 15, at least until you get to level 20. Combine the low armor class with druid hit points and no skirmish abilities like a free disengage, and remember, you don't get your mobility feat, you simply can't go into melee with this. You would actually be better off going into melee with Shillelagh and not wild shaping at all. So the suggestion I'm seeing online for this, so far, is to give the form some temporary hit points. And yes, I understand that suggestion. However, if we think about it a bit more, there would be an unfortunate casualty if we use that solution. I remember reading this and thinking, wow, this would actually be worth casting before wild shape. Temporary hit points that are recovered at the start of each of our turns. Well, temporary hit points don't stack. So if the wild shape forms provide a bunch of temporary hit points, then Bark Skin plus wild shape becomes useless. So if we go back to our template, would we have some other defensive solutions? And I think we would. First, we could boost the armor class. I mean, you could do 15 plus wisdom. That would give you a solid number, but keeps a cap of 20 until level 20. I think that might be an option. Another option would be damage resistance. What if these forms had damage resistance to bludgeoning, piercing, or slashing damage? I mean, I'm just throwing around some ideas, but I think we can probably all agree that defensively this needs something. The speed is fine, and adding a climbing at level 5 seems appropriate. I'm happy to see dark vision here. Keeping your proficiency bonus makes sense. Keen senses make sense. I'm actually just fine with bestial strike. Yeah, it's shillelagh, but it's shillelagh with the equivalent of extra attack at level 5. And if we have boosted defense, it's probably good enough for a non-moon druid in wild shape. Also, with the -5 +10 mechanics of Great Weapon Master and Sharpshooter being gone, this does okay. And okay is the mark we should be shooting for with a non-martial class's damage dealing. Multi-attack though. 2 strikes at level 5 makes sense. Level 11 though, I'm a little concerned about. This needs something at level 11. And maybe level 17 too. This is when damage dealing classes get boosts, and those boosts are missing here. So we kind of flatline after level 5. I mean, we can get a tiny boost by raising wisdom, but it's really small. Then again, at level 17 we get spellcasting and wild shape, so maybe we just need the scaling at level 11. Animal of the Sea and Animal of the Air have the exact same issues, so I won't repeat myself. I like the Animal of the Sky having flyby, and the damage reduction to compensate for a fly speed plus flyby is probably appropriate. I'm not sure why the d6 damage for the aquatic form though. That could probably be a d8 just like the Animal of the Land. I'm not sure a swim speed is a cause for a damage nerf. So to sum my issues up with the templates, these need a big defensive boost, especially if we're going to keep this hit point mechanic. Also, we need scaling at level 11. Those are the big issues. So let's go back to the Druid class features for wild shape after level 1. Might of the Land, fine. Aquatic form, fine. Aerial form, fine. Tiny critter. Okay, so let's talk about the tiny form. Druids in 5th edition can take a form of a mouse or a spider at level 2. I don't know if you've played with a druid player that takes a spider form, then explores the whole dungeon or whole house or whatever by themselves, because what's going to take special notice of a spider? If you haven't, then I am happy for you, because I have, and it sucks. Though the same thing can be done with a familiar, but because everyone always takes owl familiars, I don't see it very often. I mean, an owl isn't scurrying under doorways and is a lot more conspicuous in that Underdark lair. So I can kind of see why they moved it to the 11th level and put the harsh duration limit. Then again, if that's the issue we're dealing with, then why is this even here? If tiny wild shape isn't a problem, then just let the template become tiny. And if it is a problem, then get rid of it. What I'd like to see here is a feature similar to the 5th level Might of the Land feature. Give the wild shape an improved multi-attack. Maybe boost the speed as well or something. Then at 13th level we get alternating forms. So you're wild shaped, then you can revert to your normal form as a bonus action, and have a minute to cast spells or whatever, then use a bonus action to wild shape again without expending channel nature. Whoops, wild shape. So yeah, just a little error here. They should probably say channel nature, not wild shape. We don't have any wild shape uses anymore. You change that. And I mentioned this in my last video, but I assume the intention is that you're resuming the same wild shape, including the duration, but that should probably be spelled out. Speaking of clarifications, I just watched a video this morning where the person reviewing this mistakenly believed it allowed you to switch between land, aquatic, and air forms. I say mistakenly because it says here you switch back into that wild shape form. But being that there's already confusion on that, maybe this should say that same wild shape form for clarity. Other than those tweaks though, I actually really like this. So I'm concentrating on my summon spell, then I lose concentration in wild shape. Now I can revert, cast another spell, then resume my wild shape form on the next round, all with bonus actions so I'm not losing out on my turn. Bingo. Love it. Outside of combat I like it too. Revert to my normal form, open that door, or interact with that creature, then switch back. Big thumbs up from me. Then Wild Resurgence. So I think I covered this already when I talked about Healing Blossoms. Scale Wild Shape here, sure. Scale Healing Blossoms here, sure. But don't combine them. This increases the power but takes away an option. Don't take away options. Then we have Beast Spells, and it's just fine. But if you want to scale Wild Shape, scale your other Channel Nature option as well, whether it's Healing Blossoms or something else. And let's look at Circle of the Moon. But before we get into the details, obviously with Wild Shape being too weak, this subclass isn't really going to work out. However, we're going to provide feedback, and from what I've seen online, I think that feedback will be overwhelming, so I am assuming the templates are going to be improved. I hope they don't abandon templates entirely. I mean, let's not throw out the baby with the bathwater, but let's assume templates get fixes, defensive improvements, and level 11 attack scaling. Okay, well in that case, at level 3 we get 3 features. Abjuration Spells allows us to cast Abjuration Spells in Wild Shape. Quick Attack allows us to use Unarmed Strike as a bonus action. And Swift Transformation allows us to use Wild Shape as a bonus action or as a magic action, but no more than once per turn. So Abjuration Spells has a problem. Actually, it has 2 problems, but one is bigger than the other. The smaller one is obviously the best Abjuration spells. I'm looking at you, Shield and Counterspell, aren't primal spells. So this feature basically is kind of shoving you into multiclassing. But there is a bigger problem. You can't actually cast Abjuration spells with this feature when you're wild shaped, because this document says we lose all our class features when we wild shape. And this restores our ability to cast Abjuration spells, but it doesn't restore our ability to have prepared spells. So as written, this allows casting from a non-existent list. And I mean, it's an easy fix. Just write in the feature that you retain your prepared spells and you can cast any spell you currently have prepared from the Abjuration School, etc. As for the other problem, fixture spells. When you get to Shield and Counterspell, they need nerfing. Then this problem fixes itself. As for Quick Attack, I've seen opinions online already that this should be another Bestial Strike as a bonus action instead of an Unarmed Strike, and I hard disagree. This is really cool as an Unarmed Strike, because we grapple with Unarmed Strikes now, we knock prone with our Unarmed Strikes now, and in this playtest, those features are based on strength. And when we're in our land form, our strength score is boosted to equal our wisdom score. So bonus action shove prone, then bestial attack with advantage. It's cool, it's effective, the mechanics support it, and I am giving this a big thumbs up. Though the aquatic form does get screwed again because it doesn't replace your strength with your wisdom score. So I guess I would like to see that in there as well. I mean, why would the aquatic forms necessarily be weaker than land forms? Maybe there's a reason. If you know, tell me down below. And Swift Transformation is a straight carryover, and it's good. However, before we move on, yeah, I like these 3 things, but 3rd level is where the Moon Druid should have a use for their channel nature. Now, in the case of Moon Druid, it should enhance their wild shape. So there should be a feature here that says that they can use their channel nature and then they can customize their wild shape. So I don't know, maybe it gets swallow attacks. Maybe the attacks automatically grapple enemies because you have tentacles or something. There should be like a list of things you could choose from as ways to customize your wild shape because you're a Moon Druid and that's your specialty. And then every Druid subclass should have a 3rd level feature where they can use their channel nature to do something that's thematic for that kind of subclass. So if they had that in here, I think this would be the place to put it, 3rd level. Okay, so Elemental Wild Shape. I imagine a lot of players are not going to like giving up the ability to turn into an elemental. And what they could do here is have an elemental template and retain the thematics of the feature. Instead, what they've chosen to do is kind of combined it with Bestial Wild Shape. So you turn into an eagle, but now you turn into a phoenix. And you know what? Okay, I think that's pretty cool. And also, we're not completely abandoning turning into animals because that option isn't good anymore. We're making that option better by putting the elemental spin on it. I can get behind that. But let's walk through the mechanics. So first, you get resistance to that damage type. And I have mixed feelings about this. I get that they are moving away from damage immunity, and as far as gameplay goes, I do get the reasoning, but my Phoenix is going to be burned if it flies into the flame? That does not seem right. I think you could make an exception here. Also, if you got immunity, that would open up the option to give templates resistance to all damage. Then this would be an upgrade from resistance to immunity. And then you have the ability to change your damage type from bludgeoning, slashing, or piercing to the chosen damage type. I mentioned this when I went over the entire playtest document. I think they might be moving away from resistance to non-magical attacks, and if they are, fantastic. And since the old 6th level feature for Moon Druid was the wild-shaped attacks were treated as magical, this is basically the replacement for that. Thematically, it's also cooler, so for this part, also thumbs up. And then we get the ability to do the thematic stuff, and yeah, that's all good. At 10th level, we get Elemental Strike. This gives us an extra d6 damage on the bestial strikes of the chosen type. So for Moon Druids, they almost scale at 11th level. I mean, it's one level early, and then they scale their damage again at level 17. Honestly, if the template scaled multi-attack at level 11, I think this would still not be too powerful, but would be a nice boost to Wild Shape, which is what we want from a Moon Druid. So I'm good with this. Then our 14th level feature is the one that didn't change. Why didn't this change? Did anyone like this feature on the Moon Druid? They could do something like allow the Moon Druid to maybe combine their templates. So you get a fly, swim, and walking speed, plus flyby, and amphibious, or something like that. Or maybe another use for channel nature. I mean, the Alter Self spell allows you to be some kind of hybrid humanoid plus something else. So maybe apply the same thematics to Wild Shape or something. Anyways, I never liked this feature. I'd love to see it change to, I don't know, anything else. So as far as the Druid goes, I love some of the big ideas here, but it is not ready to go as is. The biggest thing, of course, are the Wild Shape templates. They need significantly more defense and some refinement beyond that as well. Channel Nature is a good idea, but Healing Blossoms either needs better scaling or even better, give us another option that is more iconically Druid. Fix up some wording and interactions here and there, and honestly I think there are good bones here, and this could be the starting position for what could be a really cool and easier to play Druid. But we need to pass on our feedback along to the designers to help them get it there. And Paladin lovers, we'll talk about the Paladin next. But until then, I am going to sit back, relax, and have some fun. D&D is for everyone. Thanks everybody, and I'll talk to you soon.